No mai haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Welcome back to Cult Chat. I'm Liz Gregory, and I'll be your host for today. We're really grateful for the time that Victory and Hopeful Disciple have set aside for us, and we're continuing a discussion. We've had part one of our discussion, and these guys have so many good things to talk about and things they would like to say and express about what it's like being a child growing up in a high-demand cult-like group. And they've come from Gloriavale, which is a very closed community on the west coast of New Zealand. They left a couple of years ago. They do have 7 children, and we're just examining their childhoods. They had some different experiences, but it's amazing how they completely have so many things in common as well, because this group was very tightly controlled. The rules were the same, the beliefs were the same, and there was a huge expectation on people to think the same and believe the same things. And we've had some, admissions from Hopeful around the sort of chronic theft when your needs need to be met, around the dishonesty, the putting up a false shell or a false front really of your personality. And there's more I want to look at in that sphere. We've had a good talk with Victory as well about sort of the fear and the terror, the sleeping issues. But there's so much more about childhood we want to dive into. Now, Victory, there's something that I spoke to you once about, and that's people joining cults often have their integrity stripped off them. And you said to me, and I'll never forget it, you said, I didn't have my integrity stripped off me. I was never born with any. And that has just resounded. I can't stop thinking about that quote. Can you talk to me about what it's like to be a child with no moral compass, no integrity, no... What does that look like?
I'm kind of at a loss for words how to explain it. There is kind of just this concept, your only moral compass is your fear of being found out or told off. So you cannot have integrity in a place where any openness or honesty about who you are and what you're thinking or what might be in your heart is going to literally destroy you as a person. So you internally just grow up not knowing yourself, not learning about yourself. Anything you do think might be from yourself, you destroy to keep on a good front. So you just grow up learning to lie when you need to lie, steal when you need to steal, hide when you need to hide, to get out of trouble, I guess.
And so
trouble is your life.
it is. And so do you think there are people listening to this who've left Gloriavale who'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never did that.
Oh, most definitely.
So you're saying that people in there are also doing this lying, deceiving and hiding, but that they might still not admit it?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. When something is a survival kit, it is it's like trying to take candy off a baby. You cannot take it off them. They have to learn to let it go.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're saying since coming out, you've begun to do that process of reflecting back on your life and making a deliberate decision to let go of lies and deception and false fronts.
And it's been a journey. I mean,
Wow.
it didn't just happen the moment we left Gloriavale. We had to consciously decide we're going to change the way we think, the way we behave.
Incredible.
Just on that, for me, I realised when I was 18, 19, something drastic happened in my life, and I realised I faced up to the lies and the deceit that I was living in. And from that moment on, I decided that I never wanted to be deceitful and lie again. And it was so difficult. I mean, it was retraining of my brain and everything, but the consequences of that in that place was literally life-threatening.
Yes.
I had to shut myself away from people. If I couldn't tell the truth to people, I had to not come in contact with them. I had to stay away.
Have you ever watched Liar Liar, the movie?
No.
You need to watch it. Yeah. There you go. There's a movie recommendation for you. And pretty much everyone listening to the podcast knows what I mean.
So that I can testify to that change for her. I didn't know her before. And so when she said about how, she didn't have integrity and when she was born and growing up, it didn't make sense for us because that happened, what she talked about happened just before we got married.
Okay.
And I have only ever known her as someone who will not speak anything that is not absolutely true. Yeah, and so it was
confessions.
It did very nearly kill her. Like literally, physically nearly kill her. To live like that.
Wow.
To live with that integrity nearly killed her.
Yeah, and that's why people hide it. And you learn to do that as a young child. What's the impact living like that has on making friendships in Gloriavale?
So I still say to this day, I did not have any close friends in Gloriavale.
Are you offending anyone in there? Is there anyone in there saying, that's not true, or he was my best friend? Are you offending anyone?
There'll be people who say that.
Yeah.
But you could never just have open, honest conversations. There's people in there that there were phases of our life where we were open and honest, but it could never continue. It was not this continued thing. I remember conversations. There was always this tenseness in conversations. There'd be stuff rattling around your head, and you'd have to be just thoroughly checking it. Now, can I say that like that, or do I need to just adapt the words? Do I need to change what I'm saying to make sure it's right? And
the Gloriavale speak, the semantics.
So
you're talking as a child, you're cognitively thinking.
Definitely. I remember as young as 7 years old, being consciously aware of, I got to really watch what I say in various company.
So what is it you're nervous about in that company if you say something wrong? What are the consequences?
Yeah, various. So for me personally, the main consequence was self-condemnation via other people criticising.
Okay. So it's critical judgment.
So if I said something that was perceived as bad or wrong or off, then I would receive criticism and I would turn that on myself. So I actually became the worst tormentor of myself. I took those blows, multiplied them, and turned them on myself. And so that's you're actually, in a way, it wasn't even particularly that you were being careful what you say for the sake of others. It almost in my head became I was being careful what I say to stop myself getting onto me.
Wow. And so your friendships are not carefree, happy-go-lucky, natural relationships. There's
the closest we got that I personally got to an open, honest, genuine friendship was in the probably 4 or 5 months before we left with and the principal of the school. And we started having really deep, open, honest conversations. The police had come in, remember, and had started uncovering all this harmful sexual behaviour. We were having really honest conversations about that. And then it got to the point where he realised we were thinking about leaving, and boom, the gate was shut.
Yeah. And so you're saying honesty is actually the basis for a good friendship. And so because you never had the ability to be honest, the friendships didn't follow. Yeah.
I think in my experience with friendships, growing up with all my cousins, nothing was ever based on openness or honesty. It was always just on your look or your smartness or your status, or it was just all these external things. And there was a very strong mocking culture amongst the children where they would just mock each other. So even if you had a nice time playing with this kid, if they got with one of their other friends that they really wanted to be with or cared more about, they would mock you to get a higher ranking with that other child.
Okay, so you're learning to clamber up the social status of Gloriavale from a really young age.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Is that like your main aim? What benefits do you get clambering up the social status in Gloriavale? It's not like you're going to marry the princess and live in the fancy house in a castle and have a carriage to ride in. What's your advantage?
I think the key is that it's an all-in life, and so literally it affects everything in hundreds of little tiny ways. It affects how your needs get met. It affects it can, going up higher up the list, it can affect who you marry or how you marry or where you get to live after you're married. All these sort of things.
Any
definitely.
So you're carrying all this as a child, that everything that happens in your childhood life sets you up for the next 50 years living in Gloriavale. And if you get it wrong in childhood, it's fatal, right?
Yeah, I don't think even as a child you even think those cognitive thoughts. You just do what you need to do to survive. Yeah. And then later you see that's what it's done. I remember being quite shocked, actually, in one of the years where I was teaching. I was having quite a lot of social bullying, criticising behaviour between a group of children in my class. And I decided to actually spend time individually talking about it, spent hours and hours digging down to what was going on and uncover this huge web of just absolute ridiculous bullying, getting back at each other network. This is 5 and 6 year olds.
Okay. Oh,
and
wow.
I had a class of 30 kids, so it multiplies the more kids you have in the group. But I started going and talking to the parents about the issues. Wow. And I uncovered a whole web of tit for tat and bullying amongst the parents and saying, oh no, it must be that kid that's to blame for this because their parents are like such and such. And, and this just went back and forth and I was just like, what do I do now? These kids are going to grow up and become parents and do exactly the same thing that their parents are doing. And it just struck me that what we did as kids when we were kids, we're still doing as parents now that we're parents because the group dynamic hasn't changed. The social structure hasn't changed. This is still the same way we climb up the ladder.
That's just incredible. And you've got perspective, but you had that perspective in there. And so now that you've come out, what you have is the freedom to do something different with your children and pull them out of that kind of toxic environment. And I wanted to come back to a concept mentioned earlier, and that was about, I guess in a way, developmental delay, where the ability to express emotion and other factors that you get through your years of maturity leading up into adulthood gets sort of squashed down in groups like this. So I wondered about just some of those values, perhaps, that that you probably could have held to, but you didn't hold to. What were the values, and how have you been impacted by, in some ways, a valueless society? And yet they would say, no, we've got Jesus's values. How does that sit with you now?
It's a very interesting thing, because what if you actually ask the question, what do they actually value? When you look at a society and ask what do they value, you can see it in the way the younger generations are living and how they're treating their children and what they're passing on. And yet the only thing that they're really truly able to pass on is the damaging ideology. Even though they're teaching their children in word, no, you need to love each other and care for each other and, look out for each other's needs and share. They are physically doing all this.
So they're speaking it, but there's no physical manifestation. But would they deny that? Would they say, we are, but now you can say no?
Yes, but when I teach you something, how do you learn it? Like, I can say something to you, but it doesn't mean you've learnt what I've said. You learn from how I treat you. So if I'm telling you we need to love and care for each other and share, then you're going to be looking to me to be the model of sharing and caring. And if I'm not doing that to you, if I'm criticising you and judging you at every second move you make, you're going to say, oh, so this is how I love and care for people.
Brilliant.
That's actually a really big topic right there, that plays into the developmental stages and how kids develop. There's always this double speak.
Yeah.
Yes, double speak.
Where you get told two completely opposite things at two separate times, or it might be you get told something, but then the example is opposite.
Okay.
What's lived, what's displayed is opposite. And there's this huge gap in Gloriavale between what gets taught as good and right and valuable and good values and what actually gets lived.
Yeah.
And just a classic example of it is something simple. I got baptised when I was 12, and it was a very genuine conversion experience where I got very close to God and felt very close to God. And because I was really thrilled about it, I started getting the boys my age together, and we'd get up before breakfast and read the Bible. Why? Because we were taught our whole lives, it's good to read the Bible. You need to read the Bible. It's the Word of God. From it, you get all wisdom, all this. So this is the verbal teaching. Mm-hmm. So I start up a Bible group with my friends. And
I know where this is going, hopefully.
Here we are. We think we're doing something really good. And then a leader comes in and says, what are you boys doing? And we said, well, we're reading the Bible.
Oh, dear.
And they absolutely ripped us to shreds. You are so wrong, so wicked, evil. You're going to get into heresy. You should not be reading the Bible by yourself. And that was hugely damaging. And I can think of hundreds of examples of things where we were taught one thing in word, but when you actually do that, you get in trouble, or everything you're seeing around you is opposite to what's getting.
So that has a mental impact, right?
It does. You live in cognitive dissonance the whole time.
So cognitive dissonance,
Just how do you make sense of this?
Yeah. Let's explain it. That as something you believe, it doesn't match up with how you live, and so it's like two magnets repelling against each other, and you're trying to hold them both in tension in your mind. but you can't. So you either distance yourself from one of the beliefs, or you pretend there's no problem, head down, don't think about it.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing that people should do, but they don't do, is to actually challenge one of the beliefs and change their mindset. But in a place like Gloriavale, there was no sort of place for you to do that, and you learned that from a young age, didn't you?
Yes, I think that for me as a teacher, it was after we started doing some of our training in the last few years that I actually started realizing that the reason these kids weren't, because I always had this question right from a kid actually, why is it that we're always taught to be and do a certain way and yet no one seems to be able to do it?
Yeah.
So this was a question I had in my mind right from young, growing up, and this was always a question that I had. And it was in the last 3 or 4 years as a teacher, actually the last 5, that we started getting training. And I started realising that the reason these kids can't do and be what we're expecting them to be is because we haven't set them up for success. We've only set them up to fail. And so all we can do is point out where they're failing.
Oh,
And so I went on this journey to start trying to change things, to set kids up to succeed, because we want our children to grow up as successful adults in the community. But apparently that's not true, because no one wanted to change anything.
So we came across a guy that absolutely rocked our world while we were in Gloriavale. This was a few months before we left. A guy called Dr. Ross Green, who said a lot of people base the way they treat children on kids do well if they want it or want to.
yeah.
In other words, if a child is being naughty, if they're mucking up, if they've got bad behaviour, it's because they're bad. Because if they wanted to be good, they would be good.
Could be.
If they wanted to succeed, they would succeed. If they wanted to get their schoolwork done, they would get it done. And he said that's wrong. It should be kids do well if they can. So if a child is not doing well, why not?
Yeah.
What have we not done? And we started exploring this idea and realised that our whole life was set up for kids to fail.
Wow.
And then we transposed that up, and this is where we really. So there were people in the community that were okay with changing some of the school, changing some of the stuff with kids to help them succeed.
Is this
But
after
then
the police have gone in?
Yeah,
and
so
there's a
that's-
recognition of massive
There's
use.
some recognition of some problems. But then when we transposed it up to adults and said, well, hang on a minute, maybe adults do well if they can.
Oops.
And that's where we started making some pretty big enemies because, no, we can talk about kids, we can talk about changing stuff for kids, but no, adults can do well if they want to.
Yes, and so you're looking at a journey out of Gloriavale that begin with you. Hopefully you're a loyalist. People think you're friends with some of the men in power. You've not really set a foot wrong. Victory, your life has been, marred with some more trauma, but by virtue of your marriage to Hopeful, you're sort of seen as a reasonably acceptable member of society. Loyal, would people have considered you to have been a couple? You weren't exhibiting signs of troublemakers that were about to leave Gloriavale?
No, if anything.
So we went under the radar a lot, and I got to say a lot to a lot of people simply because I had done things like turn my brother in for having sermons. I had, there was this level of where I ticked a number of boxes.
You were a snitch,
being a loyalist.
a community snitch.
So that allowed me. I actually started saying a lot of stuff quite widely without kind of being picked up on.
I think too, a lot of the stuff we were saying, we didn't actually even understand the connotations of it. We were not out to destroy the community. No. We were just, I had grown up damaged as a child, sexually abused, physically, mentally and psychologically harmed, right? Mm-hmm. I began to understand that after the police came in and they started to understand the magnitude of all this. I had a passion right from when I started teaching to somehow make this life safer for our children
Wow.
and not go through what we went through.
Mm.
Yeah, so this was just a really mind-opening, exciting,
Yeah.
but also really hard, difficult journey that we were going on to try and forge this pathway for our children and open people's minds up to
Wow.
what children were going through. Because it was kind of like there was this glass wall between the adults and the children. It's completely soundproof. The adults would look through, look at the kids. Oh, yeah, we can see the kids. They look happy. And yet everyone's screaming and yelling.
But
You
what's
know,
crazy is you look back in retrospect, rewind 20 years, those were the kids
yep.
who were suffering terror and trauma,
But-
and their parents were looking through a glass ceiling going, oh, well, they look all happy. There it is.
So I
sitting
think
right there.
I went through the same thing, and it wasn't until I realised that I was putting my kids through the same thing that I went through. So
Yes.
my son and my oldest daughter started exhibiting really bad behaviours because of the way they were being treated. And this really hit me in the face because I really cared about my kids, and I wanted. In my mind, everything I had done as a parent was going to solve all the problems I faced.
Right.
And yet they were worse than the problems that I had when I was a kid. And it just really hit me in the face that something isn't right, because this was supposed to be 1 + 1 = 2, but it's not. And so this was the dilemma that I was in.
These are big revelations to you, and the big questions to be having inside a group like Gloriavale. And there's your fatal element, because today you're sitting here doing a Zoom call on the outside, now being considered a great enemy of the church, bitter, twisted, all the other words they like to throw at people who speak a bit of truth. And so, you know, here you are doing things differently with your kids because you can see the damage of what was done to you as a kid. And I wanted to ask about that, and I think you've shared that. You're doing a lot differently with your kids, aren't you?
Yes, a lot.
Can you give
So
us
I
a brief...
had an analogy I wanted to share about that concept, because you said just before about how can these parents that, you know, they were the children on that side of the wall that were screaming, you know, had all this bad stuff happening. How come they're not doing anything about it? You know, a tap that there's a way you turn a tap on and there's a way you turn a tap off, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're running a bath and the bath is getting too full, you turn the tap off.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the thread's the wrong way?
Mm-hmm.
If the thread's the wrong way, you're seeing the water level rising and you turn it off and the water goes on more. And so you panic and you turn it more and more. And you think you're doing the thing that is going to stop the bath overflowing.
Wow.
But you're actually making it worse and worse. And that's how it is in Gloriavale.
Yeah.
Parents are looking at, you know, we've got these second generation families starting to lose all their older children, right? And they're panicking, thinking, I don't want to lose my children. They're doing the thing they think is going to stop losing their children.
I'll strangle the ones that I've got a bit tighter to keep them here. Oh, yeah,
and
I know.
What's happening? It's making it worse and worse.
Yeah.
So that's the journey we went on, is realising, hey, what we're doing is making it worse.
Wow.
And changing.
Incredible.
I think it really hit home for me. It was actually probably about a year ago now, when we heard back from an investigation that was happening in the school, and we had just spent about 4 hours with the investigator, and we came home and we were just talking about it, and I just broke down in tears and I couldn't stop crying for about 2 hours. Just the inner grief that I had held for the children in Gloriavale for years and years and years, and it just all of a sudden all came out.
Wow.
And out of that, I actually wrote a poem about I guess it kind of embodies my experience as an adult, but then also as a child, and being an adult that cared for children on that other side, and seeing what they were going through and realizing they were going through what I went through.
Wow.
And I can't even stop it.
Wow.
So
Do you share that?
Yeah.
I've got my tissue. Have you got your tissue box? Bring it back. Tissue alert.
So I called it Child of Gloriavale. The teacher sees the eyes looking down, darting around. Am I safe? They're crying out. Do you care? A glimmer of hope or love may be here. But then it's gone in a flash. The young heart behind those little eyes knows better than to trust trained spies. I've got to suck it up and shift the blame. I'm learning well how to play that game. I can't beat this feeling to be with my friends when bullying, name-calling and exclusion is how it usually ends, unless by chance I can actually be as elusive as my friends seem to be. I see my dad get treated the same and decide, no, determined to win at the game. But silence seems my only friend. If I speak my mind or expose what is the trend, I will always lose on one front or the other. I especially can't tell my dad or my mother. The young heart's emptiness inside is just another thing to hide. I can't trust that sincere and gentle look. Can I trust that sincere and gentle look? I'm learning nothing is mine, but no one owns anything. So can't I just keep that thing that I took? My mum and dad merge into the group of adults I've always had. Pushing, pulling, do's and don'ts. Eyes that don't look down for long, just darting around, searching for significance, approval and belonging. Their searching continues, the young heart searching has just begun. The topic of play is what we've seen, though our mums and dads say it's not very clean. The friends, if I can call them that, come and go according to the survival fight. The adult spies are coming, take flight. Slowly a new group emerges, maybe an adult or a child or both. Is that a look of love, a touch of care? Does my significance lie in what I do here? The young heart feels a joy it never knew, but something inside says, is it true? Does it matter anymore? I've never felt this wanted before. It may be soon or over time that feeling changes into sick guilt and shame. I must be so bad to lose all that. I must be so bad to lose at this love game. The friend I trusted and who brought me joy now seems to only want to destroy. But it must be my fault because I tried to say no, but nothing I do now can make them go. I'm trapped, it is my life. Does this mean I can never become somebody's wife? I need to try and be really good so none of those adults find out what all of us kids have understood. Don't look up, don't look down. Try really hard, don't wear a frown. This is just me, I'm intrinsically bad. A life this bad only I've had. I want to be good, I don't deserve to complain. I need to be quiet and board the working hard train. I don't deserve rest, I don't deserve sleep. I've got to keep going to keep the pain deep. I work really hard now. I can trust it somehow. Work never fails me. It was always there. I've learnt in my world it's the only safe thing to be enjoyed. I hope I die soon because I've been destroyed.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. It's devastating, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess it just kind of really captures the wholeness of the destruction.
Yeah.
It's not just this, physical abuse or emotional abuse or psychological abuse. It's a whole life destruction. You cannot come out of a place like that whole.
No.
You come out of it broken.
Yeah.
No matter how old or young you are. you were broken.
Yeah. And so how does it feel when the people inside who were supposed to have loved and looked after you and said they did and protect you, then you come out and then you express your honesty about what you felt in there? I mean, that's what you felt when you were in there, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel when they just say, you're bitter, you're twisted, and now we need to move on? What is that?
So it's actually really difficult, and it's really damaging all over again, unless you learn some. I mean, we've had some serious counselling on that, and we're starting to be able to go, hey, that's just the abuse happening all over again. They're minimising, destroying our story, not believing us, because our story is our story. No one else can say, no, that wasn't your story because it wasn't like that for me. Well, it doesn't matter if it wasn't like that for one other person or two other people or five other people. It was like that for me.
That's right.
And not only was it like for me, my eyes were open to all the other people it was like for, because I was honest about what I went through.
Yeah. That's incredible. Hopeful, what's your feelings when you hear a poem like that?
Whenever she reads that poem, because I don't identify a whole lot with a lot of the abuse in childhood.
Yeah.
But for me, there's a huge amount of guilt and shame that I've had to fight, and a huge amount of grieving that I've had to do about the sort of person I was in there. I was on the side of the people doing the abusing, more so than someone being abused. Yes, I did get physically abused, emotionally abused, and all of that, but I grew up and became an abuser. And to just look back, I mean, I spent around about 6 years in school. The damage I inflicted on so many children under my care in school was horrendous. And just looking back on that, our children, particularly the oldest three, there's massive damage that I'm still having to undo because of the way I treated them. And sometimes stuff still coming out from attitudes or mindsets that maybe I'm still clinging on to. And the damage done in so many children's lives, it's heartbreaking when you realise that it's still happening. And it's not. They can do. They've done an amount of changing on the sexual abuse side, maybe not so much physical abuse happening, but the psychological and emotional abuse is it's horrendous.
Yeah, that is. I think as we sort of head into our last sort of few minutes, have you got some thoughts there around some of this? Yeah, you held that book up earlier.
So I wanted to show this book. It's called Cracking the Cult Code.
The therapist.
It's written for therapists. It's written by a lady who was in a cult, grew up in a cult.
Great, because it says what every cult
victim wants their therapist to know.
Incredible. And I think she's written this, hasn't she? And I haven't got around to reading the whole lot yet because I lent it off to you good people. And I understand it was really written for counsellors, because you can have your degree in psychology and you can be a counsellor and be completely ill-equipped to deal with this niche market of cult survivors. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. And our counsellor says the same. It's a very niche. Not every counsellor is set up to deal with this sort of thing. And I mean, even our counsellor, we still have sessions with him. We've been going with him for 1.5 years, where he just sits back and saying, I had no idea it was that bad, you know?
You're helping train them.
She's got a chapter in here about what it's like being born into a cult and how it's actually worse for the children that get born into a cult.
So it starts with 0 to 2 years hopes. That's when hopes gets built. And we can discuss at a later date how in our life growing up, hope is actually destroyed in that stage. Between 2 and 4, the will is developed. And we talked a little bit earlier about destroying the will and breaking it. It's got years 4 to 5, purpose. And we can talk about how there is no purpose. You're never allowed purpose. You can never develop it.
Heaven is the goal.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Years 5 to 12, competence is usually developed.
Ooh, that assumes that you have some giftings that you're allowed to express and have developed.
Then it's got years 13 to 19, fidelity. So this is where that integrity is, honed really in on, and it's concreted as a good value in life, and yet it's something we never could really experience. Then years 20 to 24, love. Well, if you're forced to marry someone that you're not even allowed to get to know, and you're not allowed to have love, you're not allowed to choose to love someone, that's completely destroyed. And then it's got 25 to 64, care. And so we then step into the parent role of being supposed to be caring for our children and our family and our husband and wife over and above other things, and yet that can't happen. And then the last one is 65 to death, wisdom. And yet we're seeing the older people just really struggling to have wisdom to even pass on, other than the ideology.
Those 65, 70-year-olds came into the community at 19, 20, early stages, and their identity and who they were was quickly morphed into the group identity. So the wisdom, all they have is either what they had prior to joining, if they're willing to go back there and dig it out, or they have what was forced on them by way of the thinking patterns of the main leader.
That's right.
Yeah, so there's some really deep stuff to unpack.
That's absolutely incredible. I think generally you get these, even out here, you get these throwaway comments. Oh, I can see Gloriavale's, got itself in quite a lot of trouble. It must be difficult, but it must be a great place for kids to just sort of grow up with all these friends and family around. It's often touted as one of the positives for a group like Gloriavale. Perhaps as we wrap up, what's your general impression on that?
I think I'll just share something my daughter said to me. She was 9 when she said it. She really struggled with leaving her friends and family and that. And then when we came out here, when we'd go out visiting people and that, she'd be quite stressed. And then she came and sat down with us one night and said, Mum, I think I've figured out what my problem is. I've never had to make friends before, and I don't even know how to do it. And so this was a concept that she started realising about herself. So if it's such a great place for children to grow up with family and friends, why would a child come out of it not knowing how to make friends?
Yeah, and out of the mouths of babes, because I hear that one repeated from the adults who leave Gloriavale. I hear them saying, I'm a bit of a homebody. Well, I just stay socially away. And when you dig, it doesn't take long. They admit they have no idea how to make a friendship, how to trust people, how to keep a friendship, how gossip ruins friendships. There's all these things that you learn as a child when you have the ability to learn it. But when you were in I call it the cardboard box. Not only that, you had an oppressive hand on you, pushing in the sides, and it sort of stunted that developmental delay, the emotional delay, the maturing. Those things were not able to happen inside those groups. And you're saying it has a devastating effect on you as a child, and that leads to adulthood.
Something our oldest son said just recently. He said, Dad, I actually know my sisters now.
Ah,
I know my sisters. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, in Gloriavale, it was kind of like I didn't even have sisters. They were just nobodies. And so there's this real destruction of family tie and connections.
yeah.
So, yeah, the devastation from that is huge.
And that's because
So
the
we-
group
Yeah.
is the most important entity,
Yeah.
not the
So
family.
I think that the best answer to that question of, oh, well, isn't it still a great place for kids? We have still, with our kids, I don't know, probably on average every 3 or 4 weeks, they will start up a conversation comparing here
Yeah.
with Gloriavale. And the stuff they come out with is profound. And they tell us how awful it was. And we're talking about this is our kids even after the police had come in and telling us the kind of stuff going on amongst the kids that the adults have just got no idea is going on. And yet, zip, silent. That what Victory said in their poem about silence is my friend. They will not speak a word of it. And so there's stuff going on in Gloriavale that the parents think they've got it all sorted. They think they know their kids. You don't know your kids in Gloriavale. We didn't know our kids till we came out of Gloriavale.
Well, I'll just say something. How can you get to know anyone else if you can't afford to get to know yourself?
That's right.
That's deeply profound. That's incredible. And wow, thank you for sharing. Yeah, that amazing. That actually ties in with a final little comment from Erica Bourneman, surprise, surprise, from my new favourite book, Mission of Valor. She says, you just talked about people speaking up. She said, here is my solemn vow. I will continue to be a voice for those who have been silenced by Kwazaza Bantu. I will be a thorn in their side until they stop breaking the spirits of the children in their care. My voice may not be loud, but together with the voices of countless other survivors, I hope it becomes a rousing call. Together we form our own choir number 1, a choir for change. I really hope the world will listen to us and help save the children of Kwazaza Bantu. And isn't there so much in that we hear from leaders of Gloriavale?
Yeah.
I am going to speak up, and what they consider their little bits of change to them feel massive. I can appreciate that, but it's not that we're moving the goalpost. It's that there is a massive chasm between where they are and what a healthy society would look like, but they can't even envisage what this looks like. So you come in a little bit and you say, just have a look. You're not quite doing well enough with your education, or there's big problems with sexual safety or physical safety, but actually here is the ground you need to traverse.
Yes.
Can you do it?
Well, for example, you talk to any parent in Gloriavale and they will say that it is good to break a child's will.
Yeah.
It is good to teach them to just put down their self and deny their needs, their wants, their desires, to break that will. They still think that's a good thing. And
so
herein lies the problem with them trying to change.
Oh, and yes, we're going to continue having these discussions. I know, because Gloriavale is, they're in the news, they're in the courts, there's inquiries, government's watching them, and there are some people in there who would like to see some changes, but I guess, would you agree, while you're living in there, you have no concept of the enormity of the change that needs to occur for psychological safety, for physical safety of children.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered that was burning that you wanted to share with us?
There's one concept I thought of during the time. You talked about suppressing development of children, and that's a very real thing. But there's actually a flip side going on at the same time. So it's like you're suppressing all the good, healthy development of children. But then on the flip side of it, you're actually putting adult level burdens on children. And children are actually having to become or carry adult problems at a very young age. And so there's this compounding double-edged sword almost.
Wow.
Suppressing the good, but then dumping adult problems on.
Can you give me an example of an adult issue that shouldn't be dumped on kids? Or adult concepts that are talked about in front of children that shouldn't be?
I think things like I experienced being in the bed with my mother and father at 5 years old. Yeah. Things like that.
The over-sexualisation of children.
Too much for a little child to carry.
I think it goes a lot broader too. Just any problem the community is facing is put on the children. Yeah. Like when we're trying to raise funds for Kenya, the children are all talked about, and it's not bad. Like we all, want to make the kids aware that we need to save up or give to whatever, but it becomes this community-wide focus, and the children are expected to give the little they have to it, which in a sense isn't bad, but the fact that they're made to feel guilty if they don't want to. And I guess it's kind of like asking a pauper to give up their one piece of bread, and
they give a Bible verse, and so you feel guilty.
Actually, don't want to, but but there isn't freedom of choice in it. I think that's what becomes a really adult concept. Like as an adult, there are things that we have to weigh up and go, there isn't actually much choice in this situation. I will actually decide to do this. For children, though, to live entirely in that framework, they do not develop this giving from the heart because I care.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And I think back on the adult issues, there is actually a belief, and I came across this when I did my teacher training and study, where we were learning about the developmental stages. And of course, when we did our training, whenever we came back, there would kind of be some debriefing, sort of, what do we actually believe about this? And there were some really frank conversations about how we don't believe in any of the developmental stages because we believe children can develop way faster than what the world says they can. And so we're just going to cut them all out, and we're going to make sure they're doing everything way earlier. So they're going to get married earlier, they're going to be potty trained earlier, they're going to be working earlier, they're going to be having less sleep earlier.
Wow.
If I have to face it as an adult, it must be good to get them to face it now. Yeah. That's the concept.
Incredibly damaging.
Similar scenario to that. So, for example, if I had a, say, 3-year-old little girl who was throwing a tantrum, as a parent, I wouldn't look at that and say, look, it's nothing personal against them. It's just a little girl. They're just being a little girl. I would treat it as if it was an 18-year-old girl and would deal with them in the way that I would deal with them if they're older. So you imply adult connotations to this just simple bad behaviour.
I've actually got an example of that. When I was a young girl, I struggled to keep my scarf on. Because I was active, I'd play, I'd fall off and I'd lose it. I wouldn't. And so I was growled at about it and told, you are just wanting to be unsubmitted.
Oh, nice.
Don't want to keep your scarf on. Don't want to submit to the men. Yeah. And so this was put into me right from a young girl that these outward behaviours means I'm not submitted. And yet I know in my heart that I do care about that. So I have to, make sure all this paraphernalia is kept in place. And you can't even live life and keep it in place.
Yeah. And I just wondered, maybe there was one more part of life where if you were an older female in your household, didn't matter how old you were, but if you were the oldest, you actually took on a lot of responsibilities as second mum. And that seemed to be a common cultural issue in Gloriavale.
That wasn't just the older daughter often carried that, but then there was also, I was the youngest daughter in my family, and I was expected to be second mum for all my sister's children. So
yes.
How that played out is that as a teenage woman, if I had time off or time free, my sisters would come and say, you shouldn't be spending that on yourself. You should be looking after our kids so we can work for the community.
Wow.
And then I got married and started having my own children and was expected to keep carrying it. And I kept getting into trouble with my sisters. My sisters would come and tell me off because I was spending time with my own children and I should be looking after theirs as well. Yeah. So it's not just the oldest girl, and sometimes it's not even the oldest. Sometimes it's the second or the third, whoever's the most inclined to look after the children and the family. They're the ones that get dumped with it. Wow. Like my oldest sister didn't get married till she was 25, and before she got married, she was the one that mothered all my sister's children. But then when she got married, it lumped down to me, so it was kind of like, but then my sister above me didn't get lumped with it as much because she was put into working in the office. So she had an official community job. So, there's just all dynamics in it, but there is a sense that your time is not your own. Yeah. You should always be giving it to something or someone.
So these are the values imbibed in you as a young child, and yet you can see that it hasn't really panned out to be a positive Christian value and a virtue, because the outworking of it could never really have an outworking in Gloriavale under the strict life that you lived. I want to thank you again for sharing. We always have an enjoyable time, even though these are not enjoyable concepts, but I love the way that we can talk and chew the cud. You help me understand, and I need to understand better. And there's a whole group of you survivors from Gloriavale that have really poured your time and energy into helping people like us understand Gloriavale better, because we want to do right by you and we want to support you in what you're doing and speaking up for people in Gloriavale. It's you guys that have the connection still with some people in there. It's you guys that are going to be the aunts and uncles that are going to be helping, reaching out to your family inside who want to come to the outside. You're going to be the saviours of some of the children as they grow into teens and need a way out. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your insights here tonight, for sharing with us. It's been a night. We've traversed a lot of topics, and I am looking forward to inviting our listeners back for our third episode, where we will be dissecting. So that's Kaz, Lindy, and myself, the hosts of Cult Chat. We're going to dissect your comments. We're going to have conversation around it, and bring in some of their lived experience. Kaz coming from Centrepoint, she spent time there as a child. Lindy having grown up in the exclusive Brethren. And so there are a lot of things there that I know they're going to identify with, and we look forward to inviting our listeners along to that. So thank you for your generosity of time. We will chat again soon. I know that for a fact. Thanks, everyone.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.